My parents gave my $950,000 house to my SIL, ignoring the HOA and my legal title. My sister-in-law destroyed my prized backyard to build a luxury swimming pool because she assumed I was being forced to sign my house over to her. She thought she had won. But this morning, she woke up to a $50,000 fine from my homeowners association, a stop work order, and a contractor placing a mechanic's lien on her personal vehicle. Here is how you enforce a boundary when your family thinks your property is their inheritance. I am Clara, 32 years old, and I work as a senior actuary for a major insurance firm in Chicago. My job is literally to assess risk, calculate liabilities, and read the fine print that other people ignore. To the corporate world, I'm a highly compensated professional. To my family, however, I am just the unmarried daughter who has entirely too much space and too much money for her own good. My older brother, Mark, is 35. He is the golden child, a man who has failed upward his entire life thanks to my parents' endless financial cushioning. Mark works a vaguely defined, consulting job for my father's struggling distribution company, pulling a six-figure salary for sending emails 3 days a week. 3 years ago, he married Tiffany, a woman whose full-time occupation is maintaining an aesthetic Instagram feed and projecting a lifestyle she absolutely cannot afford. 4 years ago, I bought my sanctuary. It is a stunning 800-square-foot Victorian-style home in a gated community called Cypress Creek Estates. I bought it as a foreclosure for $420,000, poured every ounce of my savings and free time into restoring it, and today, it appraises at just over $950,000. But the real crown jewel of my property wasn't the house. It was the backyard. I spent 3 years working with a landscape architect to cultivate a pristine, terraced garden featuring imported Japanese maples, a custom koi pond, and immaculate stonework. It was my quiet place. Cypress Creek Estates is governed by one of the most notoriously aggressive homeowners associations in the state of Illinois. Our HOA president, a retired corporate litigator named Robert Vance, treats the neighborhood bylaws like the U.S. Constitution. You cannot change the color of your mailbox without a 3-week approval process and a signed permit. I loved it because it kept the neighborhood flawless and property values skyrocketing. Tiffany, however, thought HOA rules were just suggestions for poor people. The nightmare began at my parents' house during a Sunday dinner in late May. Tiffany, glowing and dramatic, announced she was pregnant with twins. After the appropriate amount of celebrating, my mother turned to me with a predetermined smile. "Clara," she said, her voice dripping with that toxic, maternal sweetness she uses when she's about to demand a sacrifice. "Your father and I were talking. Mark and Tiffany are in that tiny 2-bedroom townhouse. It's no place for twins. We think it's time you let them take over the Cypress Creek house. We can help you find a nice, modern condo downtown, something more suited for a single girl." I stopped chewing my roast beef. I looked at Mark, who was swirling his wine, avoiding my eyes. I looked at Tiffany, who was already scrolling on her phone, as if the transfer of my nearly $1 million asset was a mere formality. "No," I said simply. My mother blinked. "What do you mean, no, Clara? Be reasonable. You are one person in a 4-bedroom house. Mark is building a family. It's the right thing to do. We keep the house in the family, and you get something more manageable." "It is my house," I replied, keeping my voice entirely level. "I bought it. I pay the mortgage. I pay the property taxes. Mark's lack of family planning does not constitute a real estate emergency for me. I am not giving up my home, and I am certainly not trading it so Mark can live beyond his means." The dinner erupted. My father called me cold and calculating. Tiffany started crying on cue, talking about how stressed she was and how hostile I was being to her unborn children. My mother accused me of hoarding wealth while my own blood suffered. I stood up, put my napkin on the table, and walked out. For the next 3 weeks, my phone was a barrage of guilt trips. Family helps family. You can't take your money to the grave. Why do you hate your brother? I muted them all. I had an actuarial conference in London coming up, and I needed to prepare. I figured a 2-week trip would give them time to cool off and realize I wasn't budging. I was wrong. Entitlement does not cool off. It ferments. I was on day 4 of my London trip. It was 3 p.m. local time, which meant it was 9 a.m. in Chicago. I was sitting in a seminar on catastrophic risk models when my Apple Watch vibrated with a ring. Camera alert. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. The notification read, "Motion detected at backyard gate." I slipped out of the conference hall and opened the live feed on my phone. What I saw made the blood freeze in my veins. A bright yellow bobcat excavator was rolling over my pristine emerald lawn. Behind it, a crew of men in high-vis vests were tearing down the custom cedar trellis I had built by hand. And standing on my patio, holding a clipboard and pointing imperiously at my Japanese maples, was Tiffany. I watched in absolute, paralyzed horror as the excavator's bucket slammed into the earth, ripping up 5 years of my landscaping work in one brutal motion. They were digging a massive trench right through the center of my garden. I unmuted the audio on the camera. "Just rip all that out." I heard Tiffany's voice echo through the tiny speaker on my phone. "We're putting a zero-edge pool right here, and a cabana over by the fence. The owner is my sister-in-law. She's moving out next month anyway. I'm the new property manager." Panic is a useless emotion. In my line of work, we don't react to catastrophic loss with tears. We react with policy enforcement. I didn't call Tiffany. Screaming at her from 4,000 miles away wouldn't stop the excavator. Instead, I opened my encrypted work laptop, accessed my home network, and downloaded every single second of the high-definition footage to a secure cloud drive. Then, I pulled up the Cypress Creek Estates HOA bylaws. Section 8, Article 4. Any unauthorized architectural, structural, or landscaping modifications will result in an immediate stop work order, a fine of $1,000 per day of violation, and full financial liability for restoration placed upon the authorizing party. I called Robert Vance, the HOA president. "Robert, it's Clara," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I am currently in London. However, I have unauthorized heavy machinery excavating my backyard. I have not submitted any architectural plans, nor have I pulled any city permits. The person directing the crew is my sister-in-law, who does not hold the deed, is not on the title, and does not have my legal consent to be on the premises." Robert Vance let out a sharp intake of breath. He lived for this exact kind of suburban warfare. "Clara, consider it handled. I am calling the police for a civil standby, and I am issuing an emergency injunction. Send me the footage immediately." My next call was to the logo I zoomed in on the side of the contractor's truck. "Apex Luxury Pools and Spas." "I need to speak to the owner," I told the receptionist. When the owner got on the line, I didn't mince words. "Your crew is currently performing an illegal excavation at my address. I am the sole legal owner of that property. I did not sign a contract with you. The woman standing in my yard committed fraud by misrepresenting herself as the property owner. You have no city permits, no HOA approval, and you are trespassing. If your machines are not off my grass in 10 minutes, I am naming your company in a $500,000 lawsuit for property destruction." The owner panicked. Tiffany had apparently lied to them, claiming the house was a family trust and she had the authority to begin preliminary digging while the permits were processing. I watched the live feed. 15 minutes later, Robert Vance marched through my side gate, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. I watched Tiffany's smug expression evaporate into sheer panic as Robert handed her a clipboard of his own. The construction crew immediately shut down the bobcat, throwing their hands up in the air, clearly realizing they had been duped. The foreman started yelling at Tiffany. The police escorted everyone off my property. I didn't finish the conference. I booked the next flight out of Heathrow and flew straight back to Chicago. When my Uber pulled up to my house at 2 p.m. the next day, it looked like a war zone. My beautiful garden was a massive dirt crater. The koi pond was filled with mud. But I didn't cry. I felt a cold, sharp clarity settling over me. My parents' SUV was parked in my driveway, along with Mark's car. They had let themselves in with the emergency spare key I kept hidden. I walked through the front door and found them sitting in my living room, looking like a tribunal. "Clara, thank God you're home." My mother rushed forward, trying to look frantic. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. The HOA is completely out of control. They humiliated Tiffany in front of the contractors. We were just trying to get a head start on the renovations for the babies. You know how long pools take to build. You were trying to force my hand," I said, dropping my suitcase in the foyer. The heavy thud echoed in the silent house. You thought if you destroyed the yard, I would just give up, hand over the keys, and let Mark take the house because the damage was already done. It's a family home now, Mark shouted, standing up, his face red. Tiffany is carrying your nieces. We need a pool. We need this space. You're being a psychotic. Selfish. I'm being the legal homeowner. I cut him off, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. I pulled a thick manila folder out of my tote bag and threw it onto the coffee table. And you, Tiffany, are a vandal. Tiffany shrank back into the sofa. I just signed a preliminary work order. Your HOA guy is a fascist. He handed me a fine. He didn't just hand you a fine, Tiffany, I said, pulling the documents out. He handed you a catastrophic liability because you signed that contract with Apex Pools claiming to be the authorized agent of this property. You assumed all financial responsibility. Here is the breakdown. I laid the papers out one by one. First, the HOA violation. Unauthorized excavation without a permit. The HOA has fined you $5,000 for the immediate destruction of the landscaping, plus a $1,000 daily fine until the yard is restored to its original condition. Second, Apex Pools. Because you lied on a legal document to initiate construction. They cannot bill my property. They are billing you directly for the mobilization of heavy machinery, labor, and breach of contract. That invoice is $12,500. And since you didn't pay them yesterday, they have legally placed a mechanic's lien on your Range Rover. The color completely drained from Tiffany's face. Mark looked like he was going to vomit. Wait. My father stepped in, his authoritative tone wavering. Clara, this is ridiculous. It's your house. You pay the HOA. You just need to call them. Tell them it was a family misunderstanding. And cover the contractor bill. We can figure the rest out later. I am absolutely not paying a single cent. I looked my father dead in the eye. I did not authorize this. I have the ring footage proving Tiffany orchestrated it. I have already provided my sworn statement to the HOA board and the police that Tiffany acted with malicious intent to destroy my property. The fines are legally bound to her name. You can't do this, Tiffany shrieked, bursting into hysterical tears. We don't have $50,000. The babies are not an excuse for property destruction and fraud, I said coldly. I looked at my mother, who was staring at me as if she had never seen me before. You've changed, Clara, my mother whispered, clutching her pearls. You care more about a stupid garden and some rules than you do about your own brother. You are destroying this family over money. No, Mom, I replied, feeling a massive weight lift off my chest. You destroyed this family the moment you decided my boundaries, my hard work, and my property were completely expendable as long as Mark got what he wanted. For my entire life, I have been expected to shrink so Mark could take up more space. I am done shrinking. I pointed to the front door. Leave your emergency key on the counter. Get out of my house. And if any of you ever attempt to modify, enter, or touch my property again, I will not call the HOA. I will call the police and press felony vandalism charges. They left. There was no grand apology. Just the bitter silence of entitled people realizing they had finally hit a wall they couldn't manipulate. The fallout was swift and brutal. Mark and Tiffany obviously did not have the money to pay the HOA fines or the contractor. The daily HOA fines kept piling up while they scrambled. Eventually, my parents had to liquidate a massive portion of their retirement portfolio to pay for a landscaping crew to come in, fill the trench, and buy mature Japanese maples to replace the ones Tiffany destroyed, just to stop the HOA from bleeding Mark dry. The contractor successfully seized Tiffany's car to settle her fraudulent debt. Mark and Tiffany didn't move into my house. They moved into my parents' basement because they couldn't afford their townhouse rent with the massive personal loans they had to take out to cover the legal fees. As for me, I had my locks changed, my security system upgraded, and my garden perfectly restored, fully funded by my parents' desperate bailout of their golden child. Sitting on my patio now, looking at my koi pond, the house is quieter. I don't get invited to Sunday dinners anymore. I don't get the guilt-tripping texts, and honestly, it's the most peaceful my life has ever been. They thought my house was their safety net. But they forgot that safety nets are designed by actuaries. And when you try to cut the strings, you're the only one who falls.